My name is Christopher Clark. I'm the town administrator of the town of Harwich. Actually coming up on 5 years. It's amazing how quickly time flies. I've enjoyed myself. I've enjoyed this project too, specifically. I got into this business to try to clean up the environment and make sure that we have the environment safe for future generations, and that's what this project does. So I think it's a great project from that perspective. I just want to interview a few other people, or not interview, introduce a few other people that are going to help me this evening. On the stage, Mike Judici from CDM. CDM is the company that the town has engaged with to do the design of this project. And then David Young from CDM2 is here. So if there's any difficult engineering questions, they're going to get the ones that are going to answer them. I will do kind of the hosting a little bit, and we would like to have, if people have urgent questions, I will kind of recognize and we'll take those. Otherwise, we'll wait to the towards the end. It's just looking at it. There's two other people that I'm looking for. I don't know whether you are. Dan Pelletier is our wastewater superintendent, and Dan is going to do a portion of the presentation. One of the things we wanted to do tonight was to make this interactive. So we talk a lot about what the sewers mean and what it's going to do. He's actually going to walk through that element. And then there's a pretty close connection that we're going to have in regards to Board of Health and health-related issues. If you have an existing septic system now, what does that mean? What do I do if I want to be able to extend the life of it? And Megan Eldridge is here. She is our health director. So she will take a piece and try to answer some of those questions. He has his hand up because he can't hear me. So what we'll do is we'll get right into the slides. Are you going to?
Yeah, of course.
You can. Yeah. If you don't mind. Yep. So just a overview for what your time with us will be like. We'll do a program overview. I am gonna. We've done several presentations on what the program is and why we're doing it. The Conservation Law Foundation. I was not going to get into that detail again. To be honest, I wanted to make this more nuts and bolts. Okay, we know the sewer's coming. What does that mean for the individual homeowners? We do have a schedule update that we'll have on there. We also have a timeline for the property owners. Resources that are available. We're trying to make more and more resources are available. Having questions is a good thing for us because we continue to refine the literature that we have. Then we will get into the lateral locations. What is a lateral? What does that mean? How does that connect in? We have that component that we will go through in some greater detail. And then really questions and comments. We want to make sure we leave enough time for questions and comments. And then probably just a summary and closing remarks. So I know this map is a little bit difficult to read. I think the big thing here is just to remind folks that nitrogen is a big issue in the community, and really what we're doing is this program is to address nitrogen and phosphorus. Phosphorus is in the freshwater ponds, nitrogen is in the watersheds. We should have levels that are down significantly, and you can see at the Herring River where about 58% reduction is needed to as high as 100% at Witchmere Harbor. The Pleasant Bay area is 65%. I know at one of the homes I was in, I had a gentleman that kind of said to me, well, why are we doing this? You know, simply we're doing this, and putting the sewers in is by connecting into a sewer. The sewer facility in Chatham has the ability to remove as much nitrogen as needed to get us to be in compliance. So in a nutshell, we're doing the sewers in order to get to the level of compliance we need to protect the environment. But just to give you a flavor for the percentages that we're dealing with, the next one is actually it's 8 phases over each 5 years, so it's 40 years in total. This is phase 2 in East Harwich. Phase 3 will also be in East Harwich. This is the southern section of Pleasant Bay. Just in terms of some of the materials that we have in the past that we've passed out, we have these maps, so if your property is on there, or if you're not sure about your property, please come see us, preferably one of the engineers, and we can make sure that you are where you need to be in terms of that you are in the program or not in the program. We did do one of these presentations probably about 3 or 4 months ago, and a lady found out she wasn't in the program, so she left. So I get it. We don't take any offense at that. Sometimes that happens. And then this is the more detailed of the area. So in the purple on the bottom is really phase 2. I have kind of said to people that as they do the designs on these, we are changing. So what you've seen in the past is more of a representation. This is much more specific. So there's 650 properties that are included in this, and the 650 are shown on the screen. We do have some materials that have the maps, and again, it has the list of the properties. So again, if you're not sure, we have it. Phase 3, which I was doing the capital plan just the other night, Phase 3 is coming not that far, 3 or 4 years. So we will be back to Phase 3. Phase 3 is next, and that is the central part of East Harwich as opposed to the southern section of it. Just on the schedule, just to remind folks, we've come a long way. Obviously, we're already on to Phase 2 of the overall program. Town meeting had a construction vote May 7th of 18. The town-wide ballot, thank you very much. In order to get these projects done, we do need to do it as a debt exclusion. Just to remind folks on the debt exclusion that it only stays on for the length of the borrowing. Once the borrowing is done, that falls off. That's kind of an important concept because we're trying to make it so it's cost-effective for people in the community. And just to remind people on the cost elements of it, this year will be about $150 to the average homeowner that has a home of $350,000. That goes up, it peaks out at $650 and averages out over 70 years at $400. So $400 is generally what you would see as part of your tax obligation on this component. What we are gearing up for, and one of the things that we're doing, some of the assumptions that we made was that the borrowing would be at 2% through what's called the State Revolving Loan Fund. It's basically a state bank, is a good way to visualize it, but it's specifically targeted for water and wastewater. We are first on the list. The reason why we're first on the list is because we are addressing nitrogen and phosphorus issues, in this case mostly nitrogen, and we are a regional effort. This we're coordinating with the town of Chatham, so we are considered to be a regional application. What that means is we made the assumption that it would be 2%. There's a strong possibility that it could be 0%, and they're even talking about having some money to make it so for loan forgiveness. So being first in line, being first in this process probably will yield some benefits. So I did a worst case scenario on the financing piece with the idea that hopefully it gets better. And just I have announced this to other folks that people sometimes say, oh, he lives out of town, he doesn't live in town, he doesn't have any skin in the game. I am in the process of buying a house, so I will be a Harwich resident at the end of October. So I will say that.
Are you in one of the phases?
I'm not in one of the phases. I'll still be paying for it, though, as part of the debt exclusion. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I'm not going to go with that. We do hope that once we have the SRF application in and 90% design, we're getting close. We do need to have that material into the state so they can do the review. We still have to be approved for the project, approved for what we're doing. You see some of the boring work that is being done out there now. They're actually digging holes in the ground to get a profile of underneath the roadway. What does it look like so they know where to put the pipes. I think that's kind of an important concept in this because we do have engineering designs that talk about what it's going to look like and where the pipe's going to locate. Once they actually put the pipes in the ground, you'll have a more definitive. So the plan may say that the pipe's 9 feet down. When the pipe's actually put in the ground, it may be 9.5 or 10 feet. It's going to move a little bit. So I think that's an important concept. So the plans you have are still going to be conceptual, really up until the point in which the work is actually done. And then when the as-built are completed, then we'll get the appropriate elevations. And that will be significant as we move on. For folks, we hope to advertise the project in early 2019. Construction start optimistically in spring of 19. The one thing about working on Cape Cod, I have been here for a little bit now, and usually in every other part of the state you do a lot of work in your summer. And really on Cape Cod, we really don't do much work at all. And that's just because of the tourist season. I have, just as the administrator, to try to get the natural gas people out of the way, we have done some side streets to kind of keep them working so we don't tear up the roads too long. So there may be some work that's done in certain sections so we can get the overall project moving in a timely fashion. The goal is to have over those construction seasons that we would have the construction complete by the spring of 2021, and the sewer connections start, and the flow to Chatham in the summer of '21. So just to give you an overall sense. The next one, and we have this, I think, in some of the materials. It's just really a flow chart, so if you want to see the individual breakdown of what I just laid out, you can have a better sense for that. The property owner requirements, what we're saying here is you want to, and we are going to have a presentation on this to kind of walk through, but you want to make sure you locate your existing septic system. You also want to locate your existing water service. I have had recent discussions too with the conservation, my conservation administrator. I would recommend that depending upon where your current piping is, if you have wetlands in your property or close by to where your septic system is, you may have to go to the Conservation Commission as well. We are going to try to have where the conservation administrator will make some of those decisions, hopefully the vast majority, but if the piping is going to go close to a wetlands, there may be some additional regulatory approval that would be needed. We are trying to streamline that process to the best of our ability, but there are going to be some cases where if you are close to wetlands and you want to relocate your pipe close to those wetlands, then additional approval is going to have to be obtained. In terms of determining the preferred, once you have all that information, you should be able to come up with a preferred lateral location. Again, just for the terminology, the lateral is basically going to be the town will put a pipe in the street, and we will have what's called a lateral, a small pipe off of that. You would tell us approximately where you want that on your property or adjacent to your property, so that way if you know where your pipe is coming out, then we can match it up. The thing that we don't want to have happen is to put a lateral in and to have you change your plans and not be able to connect up in a straight shot, because that's going to cost you more money to have to run it additional distance. We will send out, and we would ask for a complete sewer service postcard. So as you get these requests, you most likely will see the CDM logo on there. That it will be a postcard that says, we're going to come down your street, we want to talk to you about the location of the lateral. Do not throw the postcard away. This is one of those things. It's not junk mail. You want to keep that because that's important. What that will do is that will generate the discussion between yourself and one of the engineering firm folks to come out and actually talk to you about where the lateral needs to go in your property, adjacent to your property. That's a key component, be it just a little simple postcard. But I should say this too, because I know we've had some questions. Some folks have been taking some of our material and distributing as if it's theirs. So anything that has a town logo on it, no one else can use a town logo. And if something has a CDM logo on it, are the two things you should be looking for official town correspondence or our project facilitator in this case. When will that postcard come?
Approximately.
Probably just after the new year, when we're getting close to...
Be what?
Just after the new year, probably, right when we're getting ready to bid the projects.
So spring 2019.
Spring of 19. They will be kind of timed as the construction is going to occur, so we don't want to have it too early or too late. We want to have it, when people have it. So once we have a contractor lined up, that will kind of help to trigger things.
We were given a different document, I believe originally from CDM. It was the sanitary sewer service location form, and it would definitely not fit on a postcard.
Yeah,
Okay.
We've called it a postcard. You're correct. So it may not be. We haven't worked out the details. Dan's going to walk through that a little bit later.
Yeah, Dan has part of that
in terms of what
presentation
that's
to walk
gonna
through.
look
So
like.
right now, the one in the guidebook is probably more like the one that they're going to get.
Yeah, it's an 8.5 by 11 folded in half to be like a postcard mailing.
And that's a great lead-in too, to just, I do want to acknowledge we have a wastewater support committee. If I could ask maybe the two ladies from that committee to at least stand up so people can see who you are and know, or just raise your hand. So you have your neighbors, three, I'm sorry, Ann in the back. Am I missing anyone else?
Not tonight. Not tonight.
So what they worked on your behalf, and we have these as handouts up here, 5 steps to hook up to the town sewer system. So a two-page pamphlet, and then they also have, and you have 50 copies of these, 100 copies of these out in the lobby area, the homeowner's sewer connection guidebook. So if you haven't picked one of these up, I would suggest that you pick one up. It does walk you through step by step some of the things. I'm just trying to do kind of a brief overview for you. But if you take this home, you can obviously go through and get a better sense for the expectation.
Question.
Sure.
I haven't been able to get a complete answer about DigSafe. Now, for folks that haven't had the experience, we've had it several times. DigSafe is paid for by the utilities and is free, and comes and finds where any of your old lines coming into your television,
Yes.
to your phone, other kinds of things, not only the live lines, the dead lines, anything that's on the property. And since our property was one of the earliest homes in this Pleasant Bay Homeowners Association, there are many lines on there. So we've had experience with DigSafe, but I don't see where DigSafe comes in here, because on the one hand, over 15 of the homeowners in the Pleasant Bay Homeowners Association right around Continental Drive and Widowth, we have signed up to have the professional engineer design our service. But I don't think that service will include bringing DigSafe in. On the other hand, once they've made their plot of where they think the best place is for us to connect, then we have to have a licensed utility installer.
Yeah, I believe
Is
that.
that the person that then calls DigSafe?
Yes.
And if that
In a
person
nutshell,
does, wouldn't it
yes.
have been better, may I finish?
Sorry.
Wouldn't it have been better if DigSafe had identified for the person that's making the plan for us, the professional engineer to design the service? Wouldn't it have been better for them to know where those lines were? Yes or no, please.
Just a second.
Yeah, I'll defer.
I can address that, sir. So our design drawings, and we just want to mention this, after we're done with the presentation and questions, we have copies of the 2 design contracts we put together for this project, and we'd be happy to stick around afterwards if people want to ask specific questions about their property. But as part of the design process, sir, we hired surveyors who then gathered all the information from all the utility companies in each area. So our design plans show all the existing utilities as they sit on your property right now. So the professional engineer that you hired to design your lateral connection will have access to our plans that show where the existing utilities are. Obviously, they're not doing any digging. DigSafe is required once the utility installer starts digging. So that's when DigSafe will come out and actually mark the utilities where they exist in the field. But our design drawings do show all the existing utilities in each area. So your engineer will have access to that information. Does that answer your question?
So our design plans will have DigSafe information on up to the property line. And then from your property to the town property line, you would have your licensed utility installer do that. I suppose if you wanted to have the engineer wanted to do it through DigSafe, you could do it through DigSafe at that point.
So the town's, DigSafe won't, if you just call up and say, I want you to come up and mark my street, DigSafe will not mark your street. You have to either be doing borings like Chris mentioned we are, in that case you've seen the DigSafe marks out there, or you have to actually be digging the trench. So the contractor that is awarded this contract by the town to build the town's portion of the system will obviously need to call DigSafe. So they'll be out there marking all the utilities within the town right-of-way and typically adjacent to the town right-of-way as well. So that'll get marked out at that point. And then once you hire a licensed utility installer, that person will have to call DigSafe as well. DigSafe typically doesn't mark up utilities on private property. It's just within the right-of-way. So there'll be 2 instances where DigSafe will be coming out to mark up.
The other thing you may want to look at, just when utilities come onto your property, sometimes they will have an easement that they'll need to have, and they should have their power line through an easement. So on your own plan, your own site plan for your home, you may have some of that information on there, even though it's maybe an older home, that they generally have those on there for the utility easements.
Chris, this is probably as good a time as any to make the comment. Yeah, so that nobody gets confused, the people that we're talking about that are contractors for the town are for the system under the roadways. At no point is the town going to contract with an engineer for your own individual property, nor do we endorse anybody in particular. That is a personal selection. If anybody's being approached by a company that says they're the official engineer for the project for your house, it is not true. You're free to go to any engineer you want to. So don't mix up the terms as you listen. We have people who are engineering the system, but that's not the same as an engineer that would hook up to your house.
Yeah, thank you for that point. Don Howell, a member of the Board of Selectmen, also Larry Ballantyne, also a member of the Board of Selectmen, is here this evening. And I would acknowledge the chairwoman of the Board of Health is here also this evening.
Engineering company, I guess the town is not having them put on all their advertising meetings, but they are telling us that we have to have the engineering done by April. Is that
That's not
true?
correct. No, that's not correct.
Okay, then they are lying to us.
Yeah, and we can only be responsible for, town activities, and that's why I kind of made the point, anywhere the town logo on it's coming out from administration or from the Board of Selectmen, that's official. People are using some of our literature and manipulating it and putting it out. Capitalism is capitalism. People are trying to take advantage of that, and there's not much we can do.
They have all the neighborhood groups getting proposals from them. I got one, and they have told us it would be $1,000, 20% off if you had 5 houses in your area, 30% off if you had 10 houses. The proposals have all come through at $900. They want the money within 90 days, and they're telling us it has to be done by April. I've decided not to do it with them.
Yeah, you'll be fine. You'll be fine not doing it with them. Anyone that tells you you have to do something within 90 days, that's just not true. It's just not true. And that tells you, the town has a chief procurement officer designation. The one thing they tell us is you're supposed to get the best price you can. Go out and get 3 or 4 quotes. Do your homework and price things out.
But it looks like the town is supporting this company because they have had all their meetings at the community center.
Yeah, the community center is a public building, so if you've noticed, and I think that this is true, I have not attended any of those meetings. I think if selectmen have attended the meetings, they've attended it strictly as a member of the audience. I don't believe any of them have gotten up and spoken at that. So at least the counsel I've been giving people is if you see a selectman that does part of the presentation, it's probably part of a town meeting, or a town sanctioned event. And certainly I only go out for town sanctioned. I was invited to a neighborhood meeting, so I did go to the neighborhood meeting. But anything that I say as the chief administrative officer of the town, I represent the town's interest on behalf of the selectmen. But yeah, there's no 90 days. I'd be aware.
I live on Sugar Hill Drive, and I had a meeting at my home to clarify and kind of to diffuse a lot of anxiety that a lot of the elderly people in my neighborhood were having because of the misinformation that was out there. So basically, I had come and invited these guys to come and speak with us, and I was, we had a good turnout. I was hoping to be able to reach as many people, more people, but hopefully the word will get out. I just want to clarify that once the town does their main pipes and the pumping stations, and then you have to get it functional and operational and get all the glitches out, is that when we actually can designate where our lateral is going to be? Or is it during the installation of the main line that we need to make a decision as to where our lateral is going to be?
The installation of the main line.
Correct. So that's why the card, as Chris said, will go out sometime probably this spring. So what happens, as Chris described earlier, is the contractor, the first thing he does is install the main line pipe in the street. At each property that's going to be served, there's a fitting that needs to be installed along that main line. It's called a wide branch. So that's where the lateral from each individual property will connect to the town's main line sewer. So that's why those cards, postcards, service forms, whatever we're going to column are so important, because as the contractor is going up the street, he needs to know along the length of your property line where he should put that wide branch in the main line. Now, you're not going to connect to it for a long time, but that's the first step in the process to get that fitting in the right location so that it lines up with where your preferred location is on your property line. Then as a separate part of the process, they'll come back with a smaller view to put the actual lateral from that wide branch to the property line, and then they plug a stub there, which should line up with where you told us you want that service to be. And then the third step in the process, your licensed utility installer comes in and extends the pipe from that part up to your service connection, decommissions the septic tank, and whatnot. So it's very important. So we need to know the preferred location early in the process, so that the contractor can get that flag fitted
I
in.
do want to take maybe one or two more, and I want to make sure that some of these questions are going to get answered in the presentation, so I want to make sure we get that right, but I'll take you two. Sorry, I'll get you.
I live at the end of a cul-de-sac on a private road. What happens at the end of the road?
So we'll have a manhole at the end of the line, and then the services will still connect to the pipe, but we always have manholes at the end of the line, and every 400 feet or less, or any time we change direction or change slope, so we have access to the town's mainline sewer for future cleaning and maintenance activities. So the manhole at the end of the line.
Thank you.
Did you want to?
Yeah, I just want a clarification that we don't need an engineer to figure out where we would like to have the hookup for, from the lateral to the main line.
I mean, quite honestly, you really don't. Once you make that determination from doing your homework and getting some of that information, and the lateral gets installed, then the engineer knows from where he's going to connect in from the septic system to the lateral, and then he can design it from there. So, you know, if you wait to that stage, you're not missing anything. You know, the engineer up front may be able to give you good, better advice of where to locate it to kind of make it a little bit easier. But how much is that worth?
Right.
That's really up to individual homeowners specific.
So you had mentioned at the last meeting that some of these installers, the licensed installers, might be licensed to do the engineering as well.
Yeah, I want to be clear, because I have to ask to make sure that I'm clear on this, that right now, we have our regulations match up with the town of Chatham's.
Yeah.
And our regulations say only an engineer can do those plans. We have requested from the town of Chatham if they would consider allowing the sanitarians to do that. So we are requesting that. At this point, the answer is that it is a PE only. Okay.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's.
I just have one clarification on this postcard I'm going to have to send back. You're going to want that in the spring, right?
Yes.
Spring, and then it says right here, this information is needed before the sewer main is installed in your street, 2019, 2020. So when did you need an engineer to determine where the best position is for that, to place it on this postcard? I mean, if you got trees on your property and you may have to change the plumbing from the rear to the front, how else are you going to determine that? And they want to know that information before they put the sewer line.
On that, I'd like to defer, because actually, I'm going to have Dan shortly get up and do how to do that exact effort. So just to finish up on this page, you will receive a notice from the Board of Health. That notice from the Board of Health is going to say that you have 1 year to connect in. So that's really what starts the timeline, that once the sewer is ready to go, you'll have 1 year to connect. So that's when you actually need to do the actual physical connection.
But you won't get that till 2021.
Until 2021. And under here, just for required property owner actions, at that point you could hire a professional engineer to design the service connection, and then we will, and on the engineers, I think we have a listing at the health department of people who commonly use or commonly design or do septic systems in the town of Harwich. So we're not recommending anyone. All we're telling you is these are people that commonly have interactions with the health department that are familiar with Title V systems. I think it's probably a safe way to say that. And then the hire the licensed utility installer to construct. We will, through the Board of Health, put together a list of licensed utility installers. If you want to get a sense for what that list may look like, the town of Chatham has 7 or 8 on their list now. We probably will start with their list as a place to start. So if you are dying to get a sense of who's in the marketplace, we have a list that where you could use the Chatham list, and the Board of Health, we will request to adopt a formal list of who is a licensed utility installer prior to the need to have a service done. And then just the resources available. We have obviously a lot of information on the town website. We wouldn't mind some feedback, just we're trying to make that website as user-friendly as possible. So any suggestions are always welcome. Town staff, I know I personally have met with a fair number of people. I've already introduced Dan and Megan, who have also met with people, that if you have questions, want one-on-one because you have a specific concern, please take advantage of that. I've introduced a few members of the Wastewater Support Committee, and I'll tell, but so the Wastewater Support Committee meets twice a month, one in the evening and one during the morning on Tuesdays. The first Tuesday is the morning session, and the third Thursday is the fourth Thursday is the evening session. Generally at 6 o'clock in the evening. The homeowner's guidebook, I already held that up.
But also we have the email, so if people want to use our email as a central way to get questions in about anything.
So if you go onto the website under the Wastewater Support Committee, you can send them an email, and that way they can get the questions that way too. On the septic system as-builts, we have those online. I think we're going to do a demonstration on that, so I'm going to leave that for a demonstration. And then we also have the topographic survey that would be available for folks. With that as me hopefully not confusing you too much, I'd like to invite Dan and Megan up. Is Megan coming first? To do the pieces to the relevant question about how we actually do this.
Hi. So a lot of you have come into the health department or called or emailed and gotten a copy of your site plan, your as-built. And if you haven't, we're here to be able to give that to you tonight. You can walk away with a plan tonight if you haven't already. So we talked a lot about the lateral connection form you're going to get in the spring. And when you get this form, you're going to need to consider a few things before you fill it out. So what I'm going to be going through is how to find your septic information and what it means. Dan will be going over water service information, and then after we show you all of those things, we can talk about what are you going to do if you want to finish your basement, or you have a driveway, which way do I go with this? So we're going to actually walk through how to look at your septic plan, your water tie, and help you fill out the form. Site plans and tie cards are now located at the Harwich Water website. It's on the Wastewater Support Committee site to link directly to it. It's on health site directly to it. It's on water site directly to it. You can get them electronically. These site plans are available for any property that the health department has a file for, has been scanned and uploaded. Larry, I don't know what to say. Your file's not in there, in our records anywhere. So there are a handful of records that we don't have anything for. So in that case, you don't have to hire an engineer to find and locate your existing septic system. What we can do is walk you through how to find your sewer line in your basement, and it will give you a sense of where your septic system is. If your sewer line is going out your basement in the back of the foundation, you know your system is beyond that height. If it's going out the front, you know your system's in the front. Beyond that information, you don't really need to know much more at this point. When you do go to that next step of hiring the engineer to connect the lateral, they'll be able to find that information out, so your utility installer will know where to abandon a tank or cesspool. So a septic system as built is a little different than a site plan. A site plan has your property lines, your house. Sometimes it'll show a proposed water line, driveways, even some get so detailed to show trees. But the septic system as-built is a basic drawing that your installer gave us when they installed the septic system. And it has swing ties, and a lot of people don't know what swing ties are, but if you look at this as-built, it's hard to see up there, but it's on page 18. We use 47 South Drive, and I know that person's here, so lucky you.
Does that mean I connect for nothing?
Yes. So if you look at this drawing, you'll see Southwest Drive. Southwest Drive is at the top of the page, so you're looking at the septic system in the back of the house, and there's a little tiny A and a little tiny B at the corners. And then you'll see a deck in a rectangle with a 1 and a 2. So what a swing tie means is where one tape measure reaches from A to point 1 and B to point 1, and that's that measurement that's given in the little table. What this is important to see is sometimes an as-built is a little different than your actual site plan. Especially pre-1980, a lot of times an installer would get in your backyard and say, there's a giant tree over here where the engineer wanted to put your septic system, so we're going to put it on the other side instead. So it's important not only to look at your site plan, but mostly to look at your as-built. A lot of site plans are going to look like this, but a lot of them are much more basic, and some are a lot more clear. So they vary from hard to read to crystal clear. And what you're looking for when you see your site plan is where your house is in relation to the road and where your septic system is in relation to your house. So that information is going to help you decide which side of the house to go out with your lateral. Do you have a deck? Do you have all of these other things that are going to get in the way to which way is the fastest and easiest way for your lateral to connect it? And Dan gets to talk about water service size.
All right, well, welcome everybody. So we're going to go through water service ties, and I have a number of examples at the end of this as to what your water service tie card may look like. There's a good chance that it was formed on the outside of your property next to a trench on the back of a pickup truck. Nowadays, we do them all in AutoCAD, so you know they're crystal clear. So we're going to go through an example here of 47 Southwest, and you can see on the picture that there's a lot of lines and numbers, right? So what I want to do tonight is try to provide, you know, the know-how to understand what we're looking at. So I guess we'll move on to the next slide. And well, first, I apologize. First, let's find out how to get it if you don't have it already. So we have uploaded, as Megan said, all of the water tie cards and all of the sewer or septic system as-built and plans, and they're all available electronically on the water department's website. So if you go to the harwichwater.com homepage, what's circled in that little bubble right there says Department News Plans for Phase 2. And there's a link for water plans and there's a link for sewer plans. So first, and they both take you through essentially the same process, but we're going to go through both just so that you can see it, and hopefully it'll sink in, you can take it with you. So on the next slide, right next to that red arrow is step 1. Step 1 says to find your water account number. So that's going to take you to the spreadsheet on the right, which is going to be to have all of your addresses. It's all alphabetical by street name and number, and you're going to get your 5-digit water account number. You are then going to go back to the previous page and click next. I'm sorry, you're going to go forward. So, and then the link just below that is step 2. Step 2 is going to link you to the web page on the right, and you're going to scroll down and find that 5-digit account number, at which point you will click that, and it will pull up your service tab. At that point, you can then print that, leave it online, do whatever you'd like with it. So, moving on to the next slide, we're going to go through the same kind of process with obtaining your wastewater. It's slightly, your water septic plan, sorry. So again, you're going to click the septic plans link. You're going to go, again, it's going to link you to another page, and you're going to go to click the following link on the right with the arrows, so hopefully you can take this document with you and guide yourself through the process at home. And this is assembled by address. So in this instance, you will be looking for just your property address. And again, it will pull you to the as-built or the septic plan, and you can save that, print that, do with it what you'd like. So to the next step, we have our ties, we have our septic plan, we have our water tie. Now, what are we going to do with it? So this slide goes through how to interpret your water tie card. Because as I mentioned earlier, they were likely done on the back of a pickup truck, and there's a lot of lines and there's a lot of numbers. And again, some of them are much clearer, but the one for the demonstration tonight was a little bit complicated. I think that's a good thing. So we're giving you kind of a real situation. So what I did with the image in the middle was actually highlighted the water line in blue. And then the dimensions that are circled in red are actually the dimensions that you can pull with a tape from the corner of your house to locate where the curb stop is on your property. The curb stop is the shutoff valve at your property line. So you can use these tie cards to locate that service box in the front of your property, and from there you can make sure that your sewer stub is going to be 10 feet or beyond that pipe. So again, for this property, I also took that and we put the water service as well as the septic. It's kind of difficult to see on there using Google Earth, just so you could see what it would look like, in real life. And if you look at the dimension on the bottom right, that 60 feet 2 inches, you can see it. That's right next to a little square box. It says TEL box, which is a telephone box. So I actually went and took a Google Street View of that home, and you can see circled in yellow on the right image is the telephone box, right? So if you get, the service tie and you look at your property, say, okay, that's the telephone box. Or a lot of times they'll use a catch basin or a telephone pole, and they generally write the pole number on the tie card. So when you download your tie cards, you can look at that, and some of it may be as easy as just pulling from the corners of the house, but sometimes, they used other landmarks. So I guess on to the next one. So on this slide, there's, as I mentioned, images of a variety of different quality tie cards that you may come across. If you had a service installed recently, within the last few years, you will likely have a third one in from the left, which is a plan that's done in AutoCAD. It's obviously much more legible, and they vary depending on who installed it, when it was installed. We have tie cards from the 1930s, so you can imagine quality varies. But now going into how are we going to locate, how are we going to use this information to locate where we want our stuff, right? Now if you look at the information that we gathered from the plan, we know that our septic system is in the back and the water service is right going down the front center of the property. Now, option A and option B would both work, but option B is much more lucrative. It would not require restoring the driveway. It wouldn't require trenching, between that tight space between the garage and the house. And putting it in option B allows the homeowner to come to the right side of the house and down a mulched, flower bed and not disrupt their lawn. So, looking at this information, you can see at this point in time, all you're doing is trying to identify where in your frontage is going to provide the least impact when you go to do the actual connection from your home to the street. So that's kind of a quick walkthrough of this property, and the lucky winner here tonight. That wasn't planned, but the next slide is actually what these completed forms should look like. So the form on the left is what I drafted for the property at Southwest that we just went through. So you can see, it's a very generic drawing. There's a square and a street. And what they're looking for you to do is just identify where on the frontage with some, way to identify where that stub should get placed. So this image on the left, you can see I drew that telephone box back in, and I put a dimension 15 feet off of that telephone box. And now, keep in mind, the dimension to the water line was 60 feet, so we far exceed our 10-foot minimum. We're going to be on the edge of the property. It's going to be able to go up the mulch bed and connect right into the back. And you have a completed sewer service connection form. Another example was one that we did for another presentation on the right. Again, the dimension that we provided there was, it's difficult to see because of the projector, but it's 10 feet off of the right side of that home. So just some, dimensions or some indication if you have trees. I went out to a home today and assisted a woman with locating her water service and providing some direction that would be the least impact on her property to where to put the sewer stub. And she has very large pine trees along the front of the road. So one way for us to identify was, okay, here's the water service box. We have two big pine trees. I want it right in between the middle of those trees. It can be, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, but it can be as simple as, we need it at this point. Show me the driveway, show me, what's on your property, but it doesn't have to be an engineered plan at this point. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. So I hope.
So we don't have to hire a civil engineer, or we can hire a civil engineer?
At this point in time, you do not have to
Repeat
hire.
the question.
So you do not have to hire a civil engineer, or
Yeah, she was asking if we have to hire an engineer to perform this function.
get on?
And we do not, you do not need to hire an engineer to complete this form. When you receive the order to hook up from the Board of Health is the point where you would need to consult with an engineer to design the connection from the end of that pipe into your home.
So if you have a grade, if your septic's in the back at a lower grade, what you need, you just can't. How do you determine if you're going to need to?
Well, I just want to
reboot your
finish
plumbing?
up with, under the regulation, you will need to have a survey, you will need to have an engineer plan at some point. So when you're ready to hook up, you will need to have the engineered plan. So
But not for this form.
not for this stage, but
Do
when,
they normally do this, if you don't want to get into this? I mean, I know where all my lines are.
Yeah, if you know where all of the utilities are on your property, you can certainly cite where you want that stub to be placed. But again, to do the actual connection from your home out to the street, you will have to, yeah.
Is there any other alternative other than getting an engineer? I'm sorry.
hold on,
Can I-
one, so
Yeah,
the question was
Surface
if you
concern
have,
about how can, you can't just say, I want my stub here, if you don't know if you have to change the plumbing from the back of the house to the front of the house, or if your grade is gonna be too much,
Well, yes and no. So again, whether you are in a low-lying area and you were in the position where you need a grinder pump, or
Not that bad, but.
all right, so ultimately, if the grade in your property drops off, and are you concerned that your septic is too low in the back?
How do you know? I can determine if, will I be able to come out my back and up my side, or will I have to change the plumbing to go up the front?
Some of these plans I have looked at with folks, they will have the elevations on them
Right.
to give you a sense. I think most of the pipe in the street is going to be 8 to 10 feet down. So just as a reference point, 8 to 10 feet below the road grade is approximately where the pipe's going. And then depending upon the elevation as to where your pipes coming out of the back of your house would be the two numbers that you'd want to make sure you're.
Well, 2 feet can be a big difference,
Right.
whether it's 10 or 8, you know?
Right, well, one of the things that they did during this design process was went out and shot the sill elevations of all of the homes.
Right.
And I believe, you assume 3 feet or 4, where it comes out below the sill?
We typically design the sewer in the street to be roughly 10 feet below the sill elevation for each property.
Right.
Can't always
So
accomplish that.
if your exit is coming out the back of your house 3 feet from the top of the sill, you should be good then?
Correct.
No matter what the side of your property is?
Right.
What's the sill you're talking
The sill is the top of the concrete in your foundation.
about? That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Double check.
Yeah, the foundation, then there's what they call a sill board, and then the
Just
wood.
double check.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
Are you, before we go on, are you
No, I
satisfied?
just, well,
Okay.
something's got to determine what the elevations are, because my
Right.
property slopes down here.
Right.
You know what I mean? I know it comes out the back here, but it slopes down, so I don't know if I gotta go out the front or not.
And look, there are definitely situations that are unique, and I have been to a couple of them already.
Couple of trees in the front yard.
Yeah, and you know, if I'm happy, we can follow up after this if you want me to
Great,
take a look.
thank you.
Yeah, we will do some one-on-ones afterwards. I think the health has a printer, so that they can print off some of these cards. This gentleman in the back, and then I'll have these two. Okay, but go ahead.
Yeah, just real brief. I live in Liberty Trail, and I came and talked to you at the water department. You showed me a color chart, which is what we have. It shows all the different areas in East Harwich that need the grinder pump, don't need the grinder pump, et cetera. Could you just make that just clear to everybody that if they see their street in those colored codes, it's very clear on that sheet whether you need a grinder or you don't. Am I correct?
Well, we did kind of cover that towards the beginning, that most of the pipe in the ground is going to be where we could feed in by gravity. If you do have a circumstance, though, in which your house is situated much lower than the road,
Right.
you could have an issue.
And,
That's going to be a
It's not.
one-off.
We're gonna do that.
and when they were designed too, I know that there was significantly more individual homes and neighborhoods that were on grinder pumps. And I know a lot of those have been changed up to this point from the original plan. So I just wouldn't want to refer people to the image that we were looking at, because it was predates where we're currently at. But I want to answer your question, but
I just wondering if it's clear or not clear by the color chart.
Just- Yeah, if I could, Dan alluded to this a little bit. So the figure that I assume you're referring to, we had different colors. Green is gravity. We had sort of an orangey color for what we call pressure sewers. And those pressure sewers are, pressurized sewers that the town installs in the street, and then each property that ties into it would have a grinder pump. As of right now, we're working on to eliminate the only street that is shown on that figure that has pressure sewer. It's just a small street off of Church Street. So there are no other wholesale streets that have pressure sewers. However, to Chris's point, I just want to reinforce this, there will be a handful of properties that just because of how they were constructed and the topography of the area sit too low in relation to the street. So there will be individual properties sort of spread out. There are a couple on Church Street, there are a couple on Bay Street. We're putting a list together, and we'll get that to the town as soon as we're comfortable with it, where in order to get them into a gravity system in the street, the pipe would have to be much too deep.
So if you were looking in the future to put in a bathroom in the basement,
Correct.
for a finished basement, that would be.
That's something to think about, that you may not have, depending on the situation of your particular property, you might not have the slope to get you into the gravity sewer.
And I wanted to touch base on just one more second on that, because I did visit a home that had a situation where they had a bathroom in the basement that was gravity out to their septic tank. Their plumbing actually went to the floor of their foundation. through the floor and out underneath. Again, you know, you see a lot of different things. So I understand that it's not as, you know, one size fits all, and I hope that, you know, we can work through this all together. But, you know, in a situation like that, they could still hook up to the system via gravity. They just now may need to put, you know, a little ejector in their basement to get it into their, you know, waste pipe that leaves the property.
And you don't need to make that decision now. If you want to finish your basement in 5 years from now, you don't have to know that information today to find out where you want your stub location. And we talked too, when we showed that slide where option A and option B, and either option would work if you needed a grinder pump, if you needed to change your plumbing. That stub location would work, whichever one you wanted to do. So you can decide later if you want to come through your house or go around your house, but the stub location can be the same.
If I don't have the elevation of the sewer main in the street, I can't compare it to the elevation of my septic in my backyard. So I need to know that elevation of the sewer main in the street.
And we'll have that by the time we go out to bid.
We'll have that at the time we go out to bid more specifically. We have it generally now, we'll have it more specific when we go out to bid. In the springtime,
The general rule is 8 to 10 feet below the street surface, but when we go for bidding next spring, all those elevations will be set on design plans, and you'll be able to have that.
But how do I determine the elevation of my septic system
Off of
compared to
your
the
septic
elevation
system
of the
plans.
surface of the street?
So the
That will be on your
as-built,
septic system as-built plans.
the as-built, sir, will have
Compared
elevations
to
on
the
it.
street elevation?
You will have the elevations on your septic system plan, and then you will look at the elevation of the pipe on the design plans out in the street and compare the two.
But I can't do that till next spring.
As a general rule, it's going to be 8 to 10 feet down, but the final elevation will be set and available next spring.
And just for that, I mean, we are doing the sill elevations too. So you have the pipe in the street, you have the sill of your house, and then if your pipe goes out your back, you know, foundation 3 feet below the sill, then you can do that calculation. And, you know, some of it's pretty straightforward. Anyone here, and then I know the question.
If your pipe coming out of your house is 500 feet from the street, what do you need for the angle, or how many feet?
So
That's a great question. So the question was, if your pipe is your system is in the back of your house and you have to run your service several hundred feet to get out to the street, there's a minimum slope that's required for that service pipe, and it's 2%. So it's a minimum 2% slope. That maintains a minimum velocity that will keep the solids moving so you don't have blockage. So if you calculate the length of the run that you have to have, you multiply that by 0.02, 2%, that will tell you the change in elevation from your starting point to the end.
All set?
So it's if it's a 100-foot run, a 2% slope, it's a 2-foot drop
Okay.
from one end to the other.
So I just want to clarify. If there's for my house, it's a straight shot and it's easy, which I wish it was for everybody. But is it absolutely necessary, because we can pretty much figure it out with all the information that the town provides, what the drawing is going to be? And also, I just want to add in there that there's going to be some flexibility to the laterals as far as fittings go from the exit pipes to tying into the actual lateral, correct?
The flexibility.
Flexibility in, as far as like, say,
Bends, you can do bends.
bends,
You can deflect the pipe.
fittings, yeah, like 45-degree angle type bends.
You just have to have cleanups when you have changes of direction, so that you can type out. And that sort of shows.
Which these little circles indicate the cleanup.
Okay.
And what that is a connection that comes up to the surface of your grass or lawn, and if there was ever a backup, that gives you a place to, road route the sewer out.
So I absolutely have to have an engineer so I get the engineer and then bring that signed plan to the Board of Health?
No, the process will be similar to how a septic system's upgraded. So if you get a new septic system, you hire the engineer, they do the drawings, they'll give you the drawings, or they will put it out to bid. So you'll either put it out to bid to a utility installer, or your engineer will do that, whichever you choose. And then your licensed utility installer will supply the plan and an application for review to the Board of Health, and will review the plan and issue a permit.
Okay, a couple questions. First, Ms. Leahy.
I have a commercial property on 137, and it's about 245 feet on 137, and I'm selling it. I don't know what the new owner is going to do. I assume they're knocking the building down, building something. I was wondering if I could put 2 stubs, one in each end of the frontage, because I don't know what they're going to do.
One per parcel is what we know.
Even for a commercial.
I think that's in the sewer bylaws.
No matter how large
But
it is.
instead of on one either end, why couldn't you put it in the middle and then have it
Right.
show? You know what I mean? You may want to think about where it makes the most sense to kind of locate
Yeah,
it.
I don't know, because I don't know what the new buyer's going to do.
Are you selling it for 2020 or?
2021.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna sell it in the next 6 months, let them look at it.
Yeah, that's another question. When do I have to decide where the stuff goes?
What's that?
Spring of 19 is what.
Spring of 19?
Well, that's when, spring of 19 is when they will be asking you, but the actual Y connection that goes in there won't be done and put in until the contractor is doing the pipe in that street. The construction period is a 2-year construction period, and the sequence that they do is they will put the main pipe down the street, and then they will come back and do those connections over to the property lines. So they're not going to do everybody's street in month 1. So it'll depend on when they're doing the pipe in front of your street, which is when the absolute decision will need to be made, whether that's, you know, the fall of 2019 or the spring of 2020 or the fall of 2020 will depend on when the contractor who wins the award is selected, and then they give us a construction schedule for what streets they will be doing in what sequence.
But don't I have to have the stuff in, you said in the spring? The stuff
Yeah,
in-
actually, I think Dave corrected me. If you have the location, then really what's going to make the decision is when they're physically coming down your street to put them in, then they would have the ability to make some adjustment. So he's saying from the time in which the bid is awarded to when they're actually physically doing the work, you would have a window of opportunity to change. I would
Change where the
suggest,
stuff goes.
yeah, I would suggest in your case, I mean, if you know that you're going to have potential change, you may want to just note that on the form, and then if possibly when that crew comes back to actually do the work, you can get a second bite at the apple.
Okay, good. Thank
Not that we want to encourage too many bites. I have here and then here, okay? So here for,
Is there a minimum distance for the lateral line from like natural gas lines and electric? I know there is for the water, you said it was 10 feet. But for like the natural gas line or your electric going in? Because
No,
one set of my house is the water and the other side is the gas.
right, there is not a setback for them. They can share it,
They
right?
could, okay, good.
thank you
At
for
this point, if your gas service is already installed, you know, it'd be kind of a pain in the butt to try to install a sewer service underneath it, because it would be falling in the trench on you.
Yeah.
I mean, for construction purposes, I would recommend keeping it, you know, probably 3 to 5 feet.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah, my
off-
concern was that it had to be 10 feet also from that.
Yeah, no, just the only, and the reason, just to, so there's an understanding of why there's a you know, 10-foot requirement, is so that if there was ever a situation where your sewer service broke, that 10 feet of separation will prevent that from contaminating your water service if you have a water service leak. So that is the reason why that 10 feet, it's either 10 feet or 18 inches of vertical separation in underground. So where we don't know where the elevations are going to be, 10 feet away horizontally is a safe bet at this point in time.
Thank you. Question?
Okay, we have a line that has to come from the back of the house, fairly narrow lot.
So what is the minimum distance off of the foundation?
Again, there is not a setback for
Okay,
the
so it
line
could
from the
run along
property.
the concrete if it
There
needs.
is no setback?
There is no setback. The only
Okay.
setbacks that the sewer regulations talk about is to the water line.
Okay, so it could be 2 feet from the foundation,
Yes.
and then how much of a trench does it have to dig?
Depends on how deep your sewer line is, but usually
I don't mean this way, I mean width.
Oh, it's a 4 to 6 inch pipe.
I've got a tree.
One bucket with an excavator.
Approximately 12 inches,
Yeah.
correct?
Well, that could vary depending on the depth as well. The deeper you are, obviously, there's a lot of
Wider
sand
the
out
bucket.
here, so the trench would have a tendency to fall in. So as you go deeper, the top of the trench would be a little bit wider. But in general, it should be, between 1 and 2 feet wide, depending on.
Yeah, and you don't want to go, if you have an option to come off of your property, your foundation, you want to be a little bit farther away, just so you're not digging so close to it.
The machinery can only get so close to your foundation anyway. They're going to have a small excavator digging this trench. So with the width of the excavator, they can only be so close to your house to dig the trench anyway. So I don't think you're going to be able to get 1 or 2 feet away from your foundation trench unless they can.
Are there any other questions? I don't want people to think that we will stick around, and if people have individual questions or want to see, we have some of the plans with us, or if you want a copy, we will definitely stick around, so I don't want you to think like this is your last opportunity, but
There's been some discussion in the neighborhoods that when an engineer comes onto our property to do the design work and he provides a drawing, that drawing needs to be stamped by that engineer. But we understand that the town won't accept the stamped drawing if it's older than 1 year before the construction. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. The application from your licensed utility installer, that permit is going to be good for 1 year. So
they're the ones that will do the digging.
But at the same time, if they're using a plan that's outdated from the code that we're using, the regulations that we're using, then it may not be valid anymore. So you want to have an engineered plan that is using the most current code.
So if I had an engineered plan of 2018, that could still be valid in 2022.
It could.
What if there's a code change in that time frame?
It would have to be updated.
If the changes in the code affected the plan.
So how do we know if there's going to be a code update?
I wish I knew, I had a crystal ball.
I do think some of those that you would know, I mean, if the state came out and said we're changing it from 10 feet to 15 feet, I mean, some of this stuff is going to be kind of known. That it would be good to double check with an engineer again at that stage. If you're going to have a plan age 3 years, you may want to have someone just take a second look.
It may not be wise to do it too soon.
Right.
Right.
So wait a minute, I had a couple quick hands go up, but and they went down. Okay, she wants up again.
Quick, we have to get a plumber to actually hook this stuff together in the back? If we don't.
If all your work is outside your house, you'll have it done by a licensed utility installer. If any of the plumbing inside the house needs to be changed, then you need
Inside is the plumber, outside is the licensed utility installer as a general rule. Are you all set, or I have another one there? Go ahead.
I called the Department of Health, asked about the current septic I have is a 3-bedroom, and I'd asked about upgrading it to 4-bedroom or whatever, since we're going with the septic. And I was told we were adopting Chad's plan of keeping your number of bedrooms in the existing house. Is there a different design or pipe size if you go from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom to a 4-bedroom? Are they all using the same types of pipes? So that in case in the future there is a bylaw change where you can actually increase your number of bedrooms, would it make sense to put that type of pipe in now? Is it a 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch?
I think generally on sewer,
the same hookup the same for a 5-bedroom as it is for 2?
Yeah, water lines tend to be a little bit more sensitive to how many you have. Generally, I think sewers are.
Yeah, our stubs are 6-inch. Some of you will have 6-inch on your existing on existing properties, and some of it might be 4 inch. You can still connect 4 inches to 6 inch, but all our stuff would be 6 inch.
Commercial properties have a larger, have a different set of rules, but residential is the same.
It's not based on bedroom, it's water use.
Yeah, it's actually not based on bedrooms, it is based upon water use, so it would be driven by that. One thing too, just to comment.
So if I use a lot of water, I can add more bedrooms?
No, the sewer use regulations that the town of Harwich adopted.
Yeah, the sewer use regulations that we adopted do mirror what Chatham has.
And it's based on your water use on July 1st of 2016. So whatever you had for that year is what you're allowed to have, whether you have 3 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms.
We do have in the plans too, just out of the 650 properties, there are 70 that right now are not developed. So there is an allocation that is there for undeveloped properties. So there is some growth potential that is calculated in that.
Can you just explain that?
Yeah, can I?
Water use, can you explain that to me?
Yeah.
I was told specifically the existing septic.
They're referring to something a little bit different than or a little bit broader than your specific question. What they were referring to is the sewer use bylaws and the allocation of flow for the East Harwich area. And we, as a community in East Harwich, are allowed X amount of gallons of flow for the whole East Harwich that are sending Chatham. So that determination was made based on the flows that Dave had just indicated. As far as your question about pipe size for a 3-bedroom or a 4-bedroom, that for a 4-inch I'm sure would be fine, a 6-inch I'm sure would be fine as well. The stubs are 6-inch. All of the ones that I have partook in installing have always been 4. Megan probably sees more going in than I do at this point. So, there's plenty of 4-bedroom homes in Harwich with 4-inch pipes. So if you're concerned about that, it shouldn't be an issue. So if there's a bylaw change.
But if you use more water, even though you have 2 bedrooms, it doesn't mean you can use 4 bedrooms just because you use more water.
And that is driven by Title V, so we are sticking with kind of the Title V formula, which is the state guideline. One here and then here.
How about irrigation systems, what's being done about that?
Yeah, so the Water Commission has had a favorable vote, if you want to call it that, stating that homeowners who connect to the sewer system will be allowed to get an irrigation meter. There's no formal policy yet, but what that's going to allow people to do is deduct the irrigation usage from your sewer bill, so you're not getting charged for water that's getting put on the line. So that's pretty good.
When are we going to get the meters?
Right now, we're still working that out. I believe that it's going to be, the water department, we have the meter reading software that we use for the 10,000 meters we have. So I believe it's going to be either the water department or future sewer department. I have a vision in my head of how I want it to work, but I'm not the regulatory body, so I can't say. Okay. But I would assume that it would be the Chatham Road office when it's
just to switch gears a little bit, for this SRF application the town's going to be doing?
Yes.
2% or possible 0%?
Yes.
Has that been entertained to be available for the homeowners too, as opposed to 5% from the Barnstable program?
No, through the Barnstable, that's a separate statute. So the statute for the connection of that goes through a different statute that the county of Barnstable has. So basically, it's a different mechanism of law.
It's a done deal. The town kind of includes 650
right.
homes.
This is only open to municipalities and other entities to be able to use.
So 5% is the best.
I mean, you're a benefactor of it. I mean, we all pay taxes, in the community, so it is benefit. Hold on, let me ask here, and then I'll go to you. Okay?
This is just a curiosity question. What about houses that were seasonal in 2016, which is what we bought, and there was very little water use because those people were rarely here. and now we're here full-time.
So the water use wasn't determined on, it was determined on, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's a 2-bedroom home, you know, it's typically 110 gallons per day per capita.
The Title V uses the number of bedrooms, and they do, each bedroom is given 110, so they both kind of interconnect in terms of the
Okay, well then
water
a
usage.
follow-up question to that is, my as-built is a 2-bedroom, however, when we bought the house, it was assessed and changed to a 3-bedroom home.
We can chat afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, assessment versus what the health has actually
I know.
approved are two different things. So the health approval is what
Yeah.
counts in that circumstance.
So those of us who actually, when don't have an irrigation system, are going to pay more.
Now,
Why?
so what the irrigation meter is going to do, so, and I'll try to lay it out best I can here. So we're going to have the traditional water meter that you all have in your home right now. After that meter, there's going to be a separate meter that's going to feed your irrigation system. So everybody who uses, every gallon that goes through the water, through your master meter, is what we're going to call it, that goes, you know, through your shower, your sink, your toilet, everything that you use is essentially going back into the septic system to get treated, right? So the people who use irrigation are still going to get billed through that master meter, so they're going to get billed for the irrigation consumption. What this second meter does is allow us to deduct water that wasn't put back into the sewer system. So it's not that they're paying less, they're still paying for the water that they're using for irrigation. They're just not paying to treat that water at a wastewater treatment plant because it went onto the lawn and not into the waste pipe.
We're trying to capture the amount that comes back into the system.
So why don't you go outside with a hose?
That's what I was saying.
Yeah, so
It's not going to be foolproof.
To your point, so you know, 1,000 gallons of water currently is $1.29. So when you go out and water with your hose, you know, right, you're likely using, you know, hundreds of gallons. People that have a 4 or 5 zone irrigation system that runs Monday, Wednesday, Friday when it's raining is using, you know, 100,000 gallons plus, you know, in a billing cycle. So
She's still going to get an irrigation meter.
yeah, you could still get an irrigation meter. It just, you wouldn't see a return on it because it's going to cost you, you know, a few $100s to buy the meter and then to have a plumber hook it up. And then at $1.29 per 1,000 gallons, you're talking.
You have the garden and stuff like that as well.
Okay, so I could.
Yeah.
Let's do, actually, did you, okay, here and then here.
This connection to the sewer system is pretty much mandated. We have no choice really as property owners.
That's correct.
So my concern, my question is, through our taxes, we're paying for electrical inspectors, plumbing inspectors, the whole thing. Why can't the town forego any cost associated with the inspections for the property owners? I know you have to have a permit, but why do we have to pay for the inspection?
There's no fee for the inspection.
There is no fee for that?
There's no fee for us to come out and check your line.
But there's a fee for the permit, right?
For the install, though, we were going to do a
Yeah, permit
connection
fee.
for the.
Permit.
But that's going to cover the
Right.
permit fee.
I'm saying, that's my question. Why can't the town forego that charge to the property owners?
Well,
Can I answer?
sure.
Sir, my name is Diane Leduc. I live over on
Can you
Church.
stand up?
Sure. Diane Leduc, I live on Church Street, and some people in our neighborhood have formed a group to address your question. We intend to try to work with the town to not pay those permit fees because we are not asking for permission. We're being told that we must do this.
That's my point.
And so if you'd like to join us,
And the fees could come out of the bond issue.
We will look at that. We have not generated that permit yet, so we could look at it. We were going to keep it minimal cost too, so we understand the cost centers on
We
this.
have
so-
not developed a permit.
But we have not developed a permit fee for that
But we
yet.
like the idea of no cost.
We'll take that under advisement.
You're on the same page.
I appreciate the comment.
And if you'd like to talk with me afterwards and help us on our committee, that would be great.
But the town is providing a service in that, I mean, just to be clear. We are
Which
providing a
we're
service.
paying for through our tax.
Through your taxes, yeah. So the question is whether we do it through taxes or fees. And you're recommending taxes. I get it.
Well, we already had a settlement with that, but we're already doing that.
So now, can I ask my other question? Because that was not my question that I had my
You
hand.
didn't have the answer, you just raised your hand.
My question, and I'll stay standing, so you know, standing, is I'm wondering if that question about the irrigation meter has been settled. Is that like a done deal? Because personally, and nothing against people who irrigate their lawns, but in my mind, the people who irrigate usually use chemicals to fertilize, and isn't that the whole reason behind this
Yeah, no.
project?
Fertilizers only do about, I think it's 10 to 12% of the issue, and we are going to look at doing some fertilizer regulation, but it's really the septic systems that are about 80% of the issue.
Well, I'm really glad to hear about that. Who did I talk to about that fertilizer?
On the fertilizer, what we're going to do, that actually probably will come under the Board of Health, a health regulation.
Well, I think.
We do have right now, state law is fairly tight in terms of what can go into fertilizers or state regulation. We are going to look locally to see if we could do a little bit more.
Thank you.
Neighboring towns have done that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I understand that we're locked into Chatham regulations as far as what we need to do with the whole inspection or engineer and then getting the installer. What's our wiggle room as far as getting a licensed sanitarium, and what can we do to get that done? Because if there's somebody that can just draw the simple line from the exit to the lateral and then get that to the installer takes the plan to the Board of Health, is that not enough?
Yeah, just in terms of that, we do have to mirror the Chatham regulations. We do have a IMA, intermunicipal agreement, and we have an advisory committee. Actually, Larry Valentine sits on that as well as I do. We have had that discussion already with our counterparts in Chatham to ask them to take that under advisement to amend their regulations, which then would allow us to have our regulations be consistent with theirs to allow for the sanitarium. So they seem amenable to that concept, but they will have to go through and formally do that.
When will we know?
I don't know, when we meet quarterly with them, we'll have to check in terms of their status.
They have to take it back to their town meeting to get approval, so it's actually, I think their town meeting's in May, at the same time we are. But that would still precede all the activity we talked about tonight, because their regulations are more rigid and requiring town meeting vote than ours are. We have some freedom ourselves. We can do a policy change before the selection level of our side. Chatham can't.
I do want to make sure I leave a little bit of time, because I know there's a few individuals that I'd like to chat.
Presentation?
We're done, yeah, we're just taking questions.
I'm just curious if you were finished with your presentation.
Yeah, if you want to wrap up, then you want to have any additional questions? One last and...
Yeah, so I have a question I think everyone might be interested in. Hey, folks, take a seat for a second. This is really important. How many people have a 3-bedroom house? Okay, I'm going to ask you again. How many people have a 3-bedroom house? How many people have a 2-bedroom house? How many people have the opportunity to increase their house by 1 bedroom? Okay, so this is what I'm asking. I'm in a situation where I have a 3-bedroom house. I have plenty of room for a 4th bedroom without an attic or anything else. Is there any way, of the 650, whatever it is, people that are going to be signing up for this whole thing, which I'm all for, can you grandfather us in if we don't hit that nut that we have to meet the Chatham? So if it's 5 million gallons, Chatham says you can take, and we only take 300,000, say over the course of 2 or 3 years, is there any way to grandfather all of us in and give us the right of first refusal? Because this member might not have an extra bedroom, this person might. I definitely do.
There's two answers to that.
Okay.
Number one, we are limited to what we can do right now because we have the 300,000
Which I
with
get.
Chatham.
Yep.
So we have to make sure that we don't exceed that because that's all that we have the capacity for.
Got it.
And I think it's important to make sure people understand this. We restricted ourselves to what the zoning was in place in July 1st of 16. Zoning can be changed at any town meeting. If 2 years from now, the zoning changes and allows for that additional capacity, the Board of Selectmen as sewer regulators are going to have to weigh out and see, does that zoning change going to keep us still within the 300,000 that we have with Chatham? So there's going to be two parts to that answer. One will be a zoning, and the second will be a sewer regulation to see if we can accommodate that or not.
Second to that, is there any possibility that we could have that bylaw changed but yet not implemented until that period of time? So we don't have to go through the process later on. That way we feel, as all of these people in East Harwich feel like, hey, we're automatically grandfathered in, and we have the right of first refusal. I'm just asking.
I don't think by zoning law we would be able to do that. That's not something we can, that's not something I believe we can accomplish.
Chris, there's more than zoning going on in parts of East Harwich. It's a drinking water resource protection district, which is quite apart from the zoning, and MEP also has designated it as a sensitive area. So even if the zoning changed, that's not going to change.
Right, we have the water, the 6 ponds area, so there's quite a few moving pieces that have to be
for a well for Chatham, and it's also a sensitive area, and MEP has that designated.
I want to let people go, and if there's individual questions. Thank you so much for your time and attention tonight, folks.
Thank
you. We'll stay around.
All you do is